I was sitting in my small, cluttered office on the third floor of the Riverside Commerce Center when my phone buzzed with Derek's text. Around me were stacks of maintenance reports, equipment manuals, and handwritten notes from my morning rounds through the building. My desk was covered with coffee cups, technical diagrams, and a half-eaten sandwich from the deli downstairs. To anyone walking past, it looked exactly like what Derek thought it was. The chaotic workspace of a low-level maintenance supervisor barely keeping up with his responsibilities. I read the text again. Reported your messy office to management. Someone needs to maintain professional standards in this building. Maybe they'll finally move you back to the warehouse where you belong. You're an embarrassment. There was a photo attached. Derek had actually taken a picture of my office through the window and sent it to building management with a formal complaint about unprofessional working conditions reflecting poorly on the building's corporate tenants. I set my phone down and returned to the HVAC schematic I'd been reviewing. The Riverside Commerce Center's climate control system needed updating, and I was trying to determine the most cost-effective approach that wouldn't disrupt the 15 companies who leased space in the building. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Derek. By the way, landed the Meridian account today. $2.3 million contract. Keep fixing those air conditioners though. Someone has to do the grunt work. Derek was my older brother by 3 years, and he worked on the 18th floor as a senior sales executive for Titanium Solutions, one of the building's largest tenants. They occupied 4 full floors, 15 through 18, in the 20-story building, and Derek never let me forget the literal and metaphorical distance between our positions. In Derek's world, he was the success story. Expensive suits, corporate expense account, office with a view, business class travel. I was the family disappointment. Working maintenance in the same building where he closed million-dollar deals, wearing work clothes instead of designer brands, eating deli sandwiches instead of client lunches at steakhouses. Our parents had long ago given up trying to mediate between us. Mom would say things like, "You're both doing important work in your own ways," but her tone made it clear whose work she actually valued. Dad had stopped asking about my job entirely after Derek told him I was basically a janitor with delusions of importance. What none of them knew, what Derek especially didn't know, was that I wasn't employed by building management. I was building management. More specifically, I owned the building. All 20 floors, all 340,000 square feet, all 15 tenant companies paying me rent every month, including Titanium Solutions, whose lease renewal was coming up in 6 months. I'd purchased the Riverside Commerce Center 8 years ago through a complex network of holding companies and property management firms. The building had been struggling, 30% vacancy, deferred maintenance, unhappy tenants. I'd bought it for $47 million, less than half what it had sold for during the boom years. Then I'd spent 3 years methodically renovating, improving systems, and repositioning it as a premium mid-rise office building. I personally oversaw much of the work, learning building systems, understanding tenant needs, and developing relationships with everyone from custodial staff to C-suite executives. Now the building was 98% occupied, commanded premium rents, and was valued at approximately $180 million. It was the cornerstone of a commercial real estate portfolio I'd built that included 6 other properties across the city. But I kept my ownership anonymous, operating through Riverside Property Holdings, which was in turn owned by a series of entities that ultimately traced back to me. The building's official property manager was Catherine Chin, who handled day-to-day tenant relations and leasing. The on-site staff knew me as Alex Morrison, the guy who handled maintenance coordination and building systems, which was technically true, just incomplete. I preferred it this way. When tenants thought I was maintenance staff, they told me the truth about problems. When executives thought I was nobody important, they revealed their actual character. And when Derek thought I was his failure of a brother barely scraping by, he showed me exactly who he really was. The intercom on my desk buzzed. "Alex, it's Catherine. Can you come up to the management office? We need to discuss something." "On my way," I said. Catherine's office was on the 20th floor, tucked away in a suite that most tenants never saw. When I arrived, she was reviewing something on her computer with an expression of mixed amusement and irritation. "So," she said without preamble, "we received a formal complaint about your office, complete with photos and a detailed report about how the maintenance supervisor's unprofessional workspace reflects poorly on the building and creates concerns about management competency. She turned her monitor to show me Derek's complaint. It was thorough, I had to give him that. He documented the cluttered desk, the stacks of papers, the casual way I'd tossed my work jacket over a chair. He'd even included a comparison photo of his own immaculate office on the 18th floor, suggesting this was the standard all building employees should maintain. "Your brother really doesn't like you," Catherine observed. "He really doesn't," I agreed. "What did you tell him?" I acknowledged receipt of his complaint and said that building ownership would review it and respond appropriately, Catherine said. "Which is technically true. You are building ownership. So what would you like to do?" I looked at Derek's complaint again. This wasn't the first time he'd tried to get me in trouble or fired. Over the past 3 years he'd complained to building management about me taking too many breaks. I was actually conducting property inspections. Reported me for unauthorized access to executive floors. I was checking HVAC systems. Demanded I be written up for insubordination when I told him I couldn't prioritize his office temperature complaint over a building-wide electrical issue. Suggested to Catherine that the building should hire more professional maintenance staff and get rid of family charity cases, meaning me. I'd let all of it slide because it didn't actually matter. Catherine knew who I was. The building staff knew who I was. Derek's complaints went nowhere because I was the person he was complaining to. But this felt different. This wasn't just criticizing my work. This was Derek actively trying to sabotage me, taking time out of his day to document and report me, using his position at a major tenant company to add weight to his complaint. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time for Derek to understand the actual organizational structure of this building." Catherine raised her eyebrows. "You're going to tell him?" "Not exactly," I said. "I'm going to show him. Can you schedule a meeting with Titanium Solutions executive team? Tell them building ownership wants to discuss their lease renewal and some concerns that have come up." "When?" "Tomorrow," I said. 2 p.m. Main conference room. Make sure Derek is included. After all, he's a senior executive there, and he's shown such keen interest in building management standards. It would be rude not to invite him. Catherine smiled slowly. "This is going to be memorable." "Yes," I agreed. "It is." That evening I received another text from Derek. "Management acknowledge your complaint yet? Probably trying to figure out how to fire you without it looking like nepotism. Face it, Alex, you're out of your depth. You've always been out of your depth. Some people are built for success, others are built for service jobs. You're the latter. Accept it." I didn't respond. Instead, I spent the evening reviewing Titanium Solutions' lease file. It was enlightening reading. They'd been tenants for 5 years, since shortly after I'd purchased the building. Their initial lease had been negotiated when I was still trying to fill vacancy, so the terms were favorable: below market rent, generous improvement allowances, flexible termination clauses. But their behavior as tenants had been increasingly problematic. They generated 3 times as many maintenance requests as similar-sized tenants. They were habitually late on common area charges. They'd made several unauthorized modifications to their space. And according to my building staff, Titanium Solutions employees, particularly the sales team on floor 18, were often dismissive or rude to cleaning crews and maintenance workers. Derek was apparently representative of the company culture, not an exception to it. Their lease was up for renewal in 6 months. At current market rates, their rent would increase by approximately 37%, from $38 per square foot to $52 per square foot. For the 52,000 square feet they occupied, that was a difference of about $728,000 annually. I suspected they were expecting favorable renewal terms based on their size and tenure. They were about to be disappointed. The next morning I dressed carefully. Not in my usual work clothes, but in one of the tailored suits I kept for property investment meetings. I looked different, polished, professional, completely unlike the maintenance supervisor Derek was used to seeing in cargo pants and work boots. I arrived at the 20th floor conference room 30 minutes early and reviewed the presentation Catherine had prepared. It covered building updates, capital improvements, market comparisons, and lease renewal terms. It was comprehensive, professional, and clearly came from ownership, not maintenance staff. At 1:45, Catherine texted me, "Titanium Solutions execs are here. including Derek. He asked why he was invited to a lease meeting. I told him building ownership specifically requested his presence given his recent communications regarding building standards. He looks confused and slightly nervous. At 2 p.m. exactly, I walked into the conference room. The reaction was immediate and varied. James Whitmore, Titanium Solutions CEO, looked puzzled. He'd never seen me before. Rebecca Sato, their CFO, glanced at her watch as if I was late. Martin Kovac, their COO, was scrolling through his phone and barely looked up. And Derek went absolutely white. That's my brother, Derek said, his voice strangled. Why is my brother here? He's maintenance staff. Good afternoon, everyone, I said, taking my seat at the head of the conference table. I'm Alex Morrison, owner of Riverside Commerce Center and principal of Riverside Property Holdings. Thank you for making time for this meeting. The silence that followed was profound. James Whitmore's head snapped toward Derek. Rebecca Sato stopped mid-sip of her coffee. Martin Kovac finally looked up from his phone, his expression shifting from boredom to sharp attention. I'm sorry, James said carefully. You own this building? I've owned it for 8 years, I confirmed. I purchased it in 2016, oversaw its renovation and repositioning, and have maintained ownership through Riverside Property Holdings. Catherine Chin, who you know as the property manager, works for me. Derek made a small choking sound. I continued as if he hadn't. Catherine and I handle most ownership communications through our property management company, but occasionally I like to meet directly with major tenants. Especially when leases are coming up for renewal, and especially when questions have been raised about building standards and management competency. I pulled up the first slide of the presentation. It showed the Riverside Commerce Center's performance metrics over 8 years. Occupancy rates, tenant retention, capital improvements, building value appreciation. The numbers were impressive. This was clearly a well-managed, successful property. As you can see, I said, Riverside Commerce Center has been one of the highest performing commercial properties in the city. We've maintained 95+% occupancy for 6 consecutive years, tenant satisfaction scores above industry average, and building systems that exceed code requirements. This didn't happen by accident. It happened through careful management and significant capital investment. Rebecca Sato was nodding slowly, her CFO brain processing the information. These are strong numbers. Very strong. Thank you, I said. We work hard to maintain standards. Which brings me to the purpose of today's meeting. Titanium Solutions lease expires in 6 months, and we need to discuss renewal terms. But first, I want to address some concerns about how Titanium Solutions has operated as a tenant. I pulled up a new slide showing maintenance request data. Over the past 5 years, Titanium Solutions has generated an average of 43 maintenance requests per month. That's approximately triple the rate of comparable tenants. Many of these requests are for issues that should be handled internally: office equipment, personal temperature preferences, cosmetic concerns that don't affect functionality. Martin Kovac shifted uncomfortably. We're a large tenant. We have more space, more employees. I've normalized the data by square footage and employee count, I said. Even accounting for size, you're still generating 2.3 times as many requests as similar tenants. That represents additional cost and resource allocation on our end. Next slide. Additionally, you've been an average of 43 days late on common area maintenance charges over the past 3 years. Your lease requires payment within 30 days. The delays create administrative burden and cash flow complications. Rebecca's face had gone tight. As CFO, late payments were her responsibility. You've also made several unauthorized modifications to your space, I continued, showing photos. Conference room on 16 had walls moved without approval. Break room on 17 had plumbing modifications done by an unlicensed contractor. Executive suite on 18 had electrical work that didn't meet code and had to be redone at building expense. James Whitmore was looking increasingly uncomfortable. I wasn't aware of most of these issues. Why weren't we informed this was a problem? You were, I said calmly. Catherine sent formal notices on 6 separate occasions over the past 2 years. They were addressed to your facilities manager and copied to your office. They went unanswered. I pulled out printed copies of the notices, complete with delivery confirmations. Rebecca took them and began reading, her expression darkening. But the most concerning issue, I said, is the pattern of behavior toward building staff. We've documented multiple instances of Titanium Solutions employees treating maintenance workers, cleaning staff and building personnel with disrespect or dismissiveness. This creates a hostile work environment for our employees and reflects poorly on both your company and the building. Derek had been silent throughout this, but now he found his voice. That's ridiculous. We treat staff fine. You can't base a lease decision on some workers claiming they felt disrespected. I'm not basing it on claims, I said. I'm basing it on documented incidents. Would you like to review them? I pulled up another slide. It was a detailed log with dates, times, specific incidents, and witnesses. Several entries specifically referenced Derek Moore, executives on floor 18, being dismissive, demanding, or outright rude to building employees. One entry caught James Whitmore's attention. March 15, 2024, Derek Morrison, senior sales executive, berated cleaning staff for emptying trash during business hours, demanded they return after 7 p.m. even though their shift ends at 6 p.m., threatened to have them fired when they explained building policy. Derek, James said quietly. Is this accurate? Derek's face was red. They were disrupting our client meeting. I was just trying to maintain professional standards. By threatening to fire building employees who don't work for us and were following their assigned schedule? James's voice was ice cold. That's your definition of professional standards? There are 17 documented incidents involving Derek specifically, I said. And another 43 involving other Titanium Solutions employees across your 4 floors. For context, our next largest tenant has logged 4 such incidents in 5 years. For total, you have 60 in the same period. The room was silent except for the sound of Rebecca flipping through the documentation I'd provided. Here's what I'm trying to understand, I said, addressing James directly. Titanium Solutions is asking for lease renewal in a building where market rates have increased significantly. You're presumably going to request favorable terms based on your tenure and size as a tenant. But from an ownership perspective, you've been a challenging tenant who generates excess costs, pays late, makes unauthorized modifications, and creates management issues with other building employees. Help me understand why I should offer you below-market renewal terms. James Whitmore looked like he wanted to disappear. Rebecca Sato was still reading documents, her expression growing more severe. Martin Kovac was no longer looking at his phone. And Derek was staring at me with an expression of absolute horror as he realized what was happening. I think we need to address these issues internally before discussing lease terms, James said finally. I had no idea our behavior as a tenant had been this problematic. That's unacceptable. I appreciate that, I said. But from my perspective, patterns matter more than promises. I've seen these patterns for 5 years. The question is what changes would actually convince me that renewal makes sense, for both parties. What kind of changes are you looking for? Rebecca asked, all business now. First, a clear policy and training around respectful treatment of building staff, I said. Building employees should never be threatened, belittled, or treated as if they're inferior. They're professionals doing specialized work. They deserve respect. Agreed, James said immediately. That should have been policy from the beginning. I apologize that it wasn't. Second, appropriate handling of maintenance requests and building modifications, I continued. Follow the proper channels, get approval for changes, use licensed contractors. This isn't negotiable, it's basic lease compliance. Understood, Martin said. I'll implement new procedures with our facilities team. Third, timely payment of all charges, I said, looking at Rebecca. If there are issues with billing or disputes about charges, raise them promptly. But the pattern of routine late payment needs to end. It will, Rebecca said firmly. I'm implementing new controls effective immediately. And fourth, I said, I need to know that Titanium Solutions leadership takes these issues seriously. Not just acknowledges them but actively addresses the culture that created them. Because from what I've observed, the problems aren't isolated incidents. They're reflections of how your company operates. James Whitmore met my eyes. You're right. And I take full responsibility for not catching this earlier. We've been so focused on growth and client acquisition that we've neglected internal culture and our relationships with service providers. That changes now. He turned to look at Derek. Derek, you and I need to have a private conversation after this meeting. Several conversations, actually. Derek had gone from red to pale. James, I can explain. Later, James said curtly. Right now, I need to focus on understanding the full scope of this issue and determining how to fix it. I pulled up the final slide, proposed lease renewal terms. The rent increase was significant but fair, 37% to market rate, with modest escalators for the renewal term. Common area charges calculated at actual cost with stricter payment terms. All modifications requiring written approval. And a new clause about respectful treatment of building staff with specific consequences for violations. These are the terms I'm prepared to offer, I said. They reflect current market rates and include provisions to address the issues we've discussed. You have 60 days to decide whether renewal makes sense for Titanium Solutions. Rebecca reviewed the numbers carefully. This is a significant increase from our current rate. It reflects an 8-year gap between your negotiated rate and current market, I said. If you'd like, Catherine can provide comparable lease rates for similar space in similar buildings. You'll find our proposed rate is actually slightly below the market median. Rebecca nodded slowly. I'd like to see those comparables, but I believe you. One question, James said. The lease includes this clause about treatment of building staff. What happens if there are violations? First violation, written warning and required cultural training for the offending individual, I said. Second violation, financial penalty of $5,000 to the building's employee welfare fund. Third violation, lease termination clause becomes active. That's strict, Martin observed. It's necessary, I countered. I won't have my employees subjected to hostile treatment. They work hard, they do their jobs well, and they deserve a respectful work environment. If Titanium Solutions can't guarantee that, you're not the right tenant for this building. James was nodding. I respect that. In fact, I admire it. Too many landlords prioritize rent over principal. You're doing the opposite. I'm doing both, I said. Rent pays the bills. Principal determines who I'm willing to do business with. I've turned down tenants before because I didn't like how they treated people. I'll do it again if necessary. There was a brief silence. Then Rebecca spoke. I'd like to review the complete financial breakdown and comparable leases. But pending that review, I think these terms are fair. We've been getting a below-market deal for years. It's reasonable to expect adjustment to market rates. I agree, Martin said. And frankly, the cultural issues you've raised are things we should have addressed regardless of lease terms. This has been a wake-up call. James looked at me directly. We'll accept the terms subject to Rebecca's financial review. And we'll implement immediate changes to address the behavioral issues. You have my word on that. Thank you, I said. Catherine will send over the detailed comparables and lease documentation. Take your time reviewing everything. If you have questions or concerns, she's your point of contact, or you can reach me directly if needed. As the meeting began to break up, Derek remained seated, looking shell-shocked. James noticed. Derek, my office. Now. James, I think there's been a misunderstanding, Derek started. The only misunderstanding, James said coldly, is that I thought we were running a professional organization. Apparently I was wrong. My office. 5 minutes. As the Titanium Solutions executives filed out, Derek caught my eye. I couldn't read his expression. It was somewhere between rage, humiliation, and disbelief. When the room was empty except for Catherine and me, she let out a long breath. That was intense. It needed to happen, I said. Derek's been escalating for years. Better to address it now than let it fester. Do you think Titanium Solutions will actually change their culture? Maybe, I said. James seemed genuinely shocked. Whether that translates to meaningful change, we'll see. But at minimum, Derek's behavior will have consequences. That's a start. My phone buzzed. Text from Derek. We need to talk. Tonight. I'll come to your place. I replied, my office. Here in the building. 7 p.m. The response was immediate. You have an office? 20th floor. Next to Catherine's. I'll tell security to let you up. At 7 p.m., Derek arrived at my office looking like he'd been through a gauntlet. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled. Tie loosened, hair mussed, expression haggard. My office was nothing like the cluttered maintenance supervisor space he'd photographed and reported. This was a proper executive office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture, shelves lined with property management books and architectural models of my various buildings. Derek stood in the doorway taking it in. "How long have you had this office?" 8 years, I said. "Since I bought the building. The other office on 3, that's my working space. Where I review maintenance reports, study building systems, meet with contractors. This is where I handle ownership business." "Why?" Derek asked, and his voice cracked slightly. "Why pretend to be maintenance staff? Why not tell everyone you own the building?" "Because I learned more this way," I said simply. "When people think you're nobody important, they show you who they really are. Tenants tell maintenance supervisors the truth about problems they'd never mention to ownership. Executives reveal their actual character when they think you can't affect their lives. And brothers show exactly how they see you when they think you're safely beneath them." Derek flinched. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I asked. "Derek, you've spent years treating me like I was a failure. You've mocked my work, belittled my choices, told our parents I was an embarrassment to the family. You complained to my boss, who is me, trying to get me fired from a job I don't actually have. You took time out of your day to document and photograph my unprofessional workspace, and file a formal complaint." "I didn't know." "That's exactly the point," I interrupted. "You didn't know, so you felt safe being cruel. You thought I was powerless, so you kicked down. That's who you've been for years, Derek. Not just to me, to cleaning staff, maintenance workers, anyone you perceived as beneath you. And you never questioned whether that behavior was okay because you never faced consequences for it." Derek sank into a chair. "James is probably going to fire me." "Maybe," I said. "That's his decision, not mine. But you should know that your behavior reflected on Titanium Solutions as a tenant. If your company doesn't renew their lease, or if they do but with the cultural requirements I've stipulated, that's partly because of how you've treated people." "I'm sorry," Derek said quietly. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry for the complaint. I'm sorry for years of being a terrible brother." "Are you sorry because you got caught?" I asked. "Or because you actually understand why it was wrong?" Derek was quiet for a long time. "Both, I think. I'm definitely sorry I got caught. That I humiliated myself in front of my CEO and CFO. That my behavior might cost me my job. But I'm also starting to realize how shitty I've been. Not just to you. To everyone I thought was beneath me." "That's a start," I said. "What happens now?" Derek asked. "Are you going to tell Mom and Dad? Let them know their successful son is actually the failure and their failure son is actually successful." "I'm not going to tell them anything," I said. "If you want them to know, you can tell them. But Derek, I don't measure success by who makes more money or owns more property. I measure it by how you treat people and what you build. By that measure, we're both still works in progress." Derek looked up at me. "How do you not hate me? After everything I've done?" "Because you're my brother," I said simply. "And because I've seen what happens when people let resentment consume them. I'd rather invest energy in building things than destroying relationships. But that doesn't mean I'll tolerate abuse. The choice is yours: grow into someone better or keep being who you've been. But if you choose the latter, don't expect me to keep providing safety net." Derek nodded slowly. "The lease terms you offered Titanium Solutions. They're fair." "They're fair," I confirmed. "Below median market rate, actually. I'm not trying to punish your company for your behavior. I'm just insisting on standards that should have existed all along. And if I actually change, if I start treating people better, then you'll be someone I'm proud to call my brother," I said. "But you have to do it because it's right, not because it benefits you. That's the difference between genuine change and performance." Derek stood up slowly. "I should go. I have a lot to think about." As he reached the door, he turned back. "Alex, thank you for not destroying me when you could have. For giving me a chance to be better. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it." "We all deserve chances to grow," I said. "The question is whether we take them." Over the next several months, I watched Derek's transformation with cautious optimism. He wasn't perfect. Old habits die hard, but he was trying. He apologized to building staff he'd been rude to. He started saying thank you to cleaning crews. He helped implement Titanium Solutions' new cultural training program. James Whitmore didn't fire him, but Derek was put on a performance improvement plan with specific behavioral metrics. His bonus was reduced by 40%. His next promotion was delayed indefinitely. These weren't punishments, James explained to him, but consequences and opportunities to demonstrate growth. Titanium Solutions renewed their lease at the proposed terms. Rebecca Sato implemented new financial controls that eliminated late payments. Martin Kovac established proper procedures for building modifications. And James personally apologized to Catherine and me for the company's past behavior as a tenant. 6 months after the infamous meeting, Derek and I had dinner at a restaurant neither of us had suggested. Neutral territory picked by mutual agreement. I'm still at Titanium Solutions, Derek said. Still on the improvement plan, but James says I'm making genuine progress. That's good, I said. I told Mom and Dad, Derek added. About you owning the building. About the real estate portfolio. About everything. How did they take it? Mom cried. Dad looked confused for about 3 days. Then they started asking why you never told them. I explained that you probably didn't tell them for the same reason you didn't tell me, because you wanted to be valued for who you are, not what you own. That's surprisingly insightful, I observed. Derek smiled slightly. I'm working on the insight thing. Part of the improvement plan. Turns out understanding other people's perspectives is a learnable skill. Who you? Most people who've ever experienced empathy, I said, but I was smiling too. Fair point. Derek paused. I'm not going to ask you to forget the past. I know I was terrible. But I want you to know I'm trying to be better. Not because it benefits me, though it does, but because I finally understand that how you treat people matters more than what you achieve. That's what I've been trying to tell you for years, I said. I know. I should have listened. I'm listening now. We finished dinner talking about less fraught topics, sports, movies, family gossip. It wasn't the relationship we'd had as kids, before success and status had poisoned Derek's perspective. But it was better than what we'd had for the past decade. As we left the restaurant, Derek said, one more thing. That office on 3, the messy one I photographed and complained about. Do you actually need it? Why? Because I was thinking, maybe I could volunteer there sometimes. Help with maintenance coordination or building systems. Learn the unglamorous side of real estate. Assuming you'd be willing to teach me. I looked at him carefully. You want to learn maintenance coordination? I want to learn humility, Derek said. And I figure the best way to do that is to actually understand the work that people like me have been dismissing for years. So yes, I want to learn maintenance coordination. I want to fix coffee makers and review HVAC schematics and understand why building systems matter. If you'll let me. You'd be terrible at it, I said honestly. At least at first. Probably, Derek agreed. But I'd like to try. With your permission. I thought about the years of condescension, the complaints, the attempts to get me fired. I thought about Derek's transformation over the past months. Imperfect but genuine. And I thought about the choice I'd made years ago to build things rather than destroy relationships. Hey, I said. Saturday mornings. Dress for actual work. You'll get dirty. And if you complain once about the conditions or the tasks, you're out. Understood. Understood, Derek said. Thank you, Alex. Really. A year later, the Riverside Commerce Center was featured in a commercial real estate publication as one of the city's best-managed mid-rise properties. The article mentioned the owner's hands-on approach and commitment to both tenant satisfaction and employee welfare. Derek was quoted in the article, not as a tenant executive, but as someone who'd volunteered to learn building management and had been surprised by its complexity. I thought I understood real estate because I worked in an office building, he said in the interview. But I didn't understand anything. There's incredible skill and knowledge required to keep a building running smoothly. I'm grateful I got the chance to learn that. My parents framed the article and hung it in their living room. Mom called to say she was proud of both of us. Me for building something successful, Derek for having the humility to learn from his mistakes. And every Saturday morning, Derek still showed up at 8 a.m. to help with maintenance coordination, building inspections and system reviews. He wasn't great at it, but he was trying. And that mattered more than competence. Because at the end of the day, success isn't about the office you have or the title on your business card. It's about who you choose to be when you think nobody important is watching. And sometimes, the brother you dismiss as maintenance staff turns out to own the entire building and teaches you what really matters. That's what family looks like when it works.